Hello and welcome back, and just before we start today's video I just wanted to highlight a lovely little freebie that's covered by today's video. If you've come to this video because you wanted to see about migrating your data away onto a brand new drive within your OS and more, ultimately disk cloning, and you're looking at disk copy, I'm pleased to let you know that in the description below and in the first comment is a free license key for the first 100 users supplied by EaseUS. They're sponsoring this video, and if you do want to get hold of this software completely for free, get hold of that key in the description and in the first comment. Then go over to their website, download the free trial version of Disk Copy. Then once you've downloaded that, it'll be a very quick download. Open it up in your downloads area. From there, start installing the software. When you install the software and you get to the area where you need the license key, it's there on the top right of the screen. And of course, it is linked below in the description. Go ahead, install that software. And when the software is installed, open it up, and where it says to choose a plan, enter that key in the bottom of the screen there. You don't need to supply an email. There's none of the online stuff apart from authentication there. And once you've activated that account, you've got full access to a lifetime license for Disk Copy for one machine. But again, it's only available for the first 100 users below using that code, and I'll hopefully update when it runs out. But it's that straightforward, and once you've got that, again, it's a lifetime pass for that. But that's enough of the jibber jabber. Let's crack on directly with today's video. Hello and welcome back, and that is right. Today we want to talk about SSD and hard drive migration, or cloning, or duplicating. Ultimately it goes by many names, and on this channel in the last 2 to 3 years we have discussed the subject of SSDs a whole world of a lot. And in today's video, utilizing EaseUS's Disk Copy Pro software, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to duplicate the OS drive inside your system and maybe showing its age a little bit onto a brand new faster drive. But before we go any further, let's dig into why we are doing this. As mentioned, we've covered a lot of SSD stuff here on the channel, and indeed we've talked about EaseUS as well when we were talking about their data recovery services. We've utilized and recommended their software before, and they are sponsoring this video by providing a key for us to show you exactly how it's done. But I'm going to let you have a look around the curtain for just a moment. I'll be straight with you. We were going to duplicate this particular machine we're utilising today anyway. So we thought, you know what? We'll ask them for a free code in exchange for this video for something we were going to do because we've recommended their software a bunch of times anyway. So right now we're utilising one of our test rigs here. We've got 2 or 3 of them technically here on the channel we use for testing, and this is what I would argue to be one of our lower tier models. And this one's utilising a very old SATA SSD, a Seagate Firecuda 120, which when it was launched was great. But it's a SATA SSD. That means it's going to cap out at 500 megs. And now we're slowly upgrading all of them, including this rig, to take advantage of a Gen 5 SSD. This is the AData Legend 920, a 2 TB drive. So we are moving from a drive that was 500 megabytes per second at a terabyte onto a 2 terabyte drive that can comfortably hit 9 to 10,000 megabytes per second. And although there are ways and means we could have done this, we could have cloned it onto an external drive, we could have cloned it and migrated over to another machine, or even moved this drive over. This disk copy software we're going to be talking about today means that we can do the whole thing in system. What do I mean by that? Well, this allows us to clone everything, the partitions and everything, over to our brand new disk, and then extend and expand everything to accommodate the whole space on our native OS with this software here. We could have used a duplicator. We could have used a duplicator like this one that we've used on the channel before, and this duplicator here, this knocks around for about $180 to $190. This would allow us to have taken the original SSD, which unfortunately is SATA, remember, so then there is going to be elements of hardware compatibility, introduce that drive into here, introduce our other drive if they were NVMe, and clone those drives on a bit by bit level. That would have worked, but that would have still required this to work via an external dock, and it would have required an adapter that had both M2 NVMe and SATA for the carryover. The reason we're doing this is so we can move over to a much faster drive in the most convenient way possible, hence this software. So again, you can find it online. You can utilize some of the features and services of this completely for free. You can download it immediately, but you do have to be, as mentioned earlier on, a home user. Business users can't really take advantage of the free services. You click it, you download it, it's automatic. It takes place in the background when you download it. For me personally, I've already downloaded it, installed our new key. Just go ahead and run this software. You're going to run it as an admin. Very, very important. If you're not running as an admin generally, right click and always select run as an administrator anyway. And as you can see immediately, the software has picked up an extra drive that we're going to be migrating our operating system and all of our files over to. As you can see there on screen. So straight away it's inviting me to move it over. Now, if that was all I was going to do, then I could just go ahead and do that. But we're going to show you how to do that in just a moment. And again, if that's what you came to this video for, timeline on the bottom of the screen, and you can skip ahead to just how easy it is going to be. But for the rest of you, as you can see here, there is my OS drive. You can see the amount of storage space it has available, how much it is using, individual partitions for the recovery drive, the works. And down there is our new drive there, which is currently utilized as an existing volume. I wanted to double check that it worked. I wanted to utilize this software here, Crystal Disk, just to double check that it was working, check the hour rating on there, then making sure that it was on the right transfer there, that it was a 5x4 drive and a 5x4 lane. I just wanted to check that it was fine. So in order to do that, I've mounted it, but don't worry, this is going to completely eradicate any of those partitions that I've already created on this drive. The other thing I wanted to talk about that you can do within Disk Copy Pro is down here, when you can see that I've installed a USB drive. Now, why would I do that? Well, nice and simple, because a lot of the time, if you're cloning a drive, so if you were cloning an SSD inside a system like this, and rather than upgrading your existing system, you wanted to clone that drive onto a new rig, you have to bear in mind that that new rig may have different motherboards, it may have different CPU parts and different network adapters and more, and all of those things require drivers. Now Windows 10 and Windows 11 has got better and better in the last few years on extrapolating default drivers and actually downloading drivers from within the BIOS by default. As long as you give your your base level motherboard internet access, you can actually download the drivers directly without even an OS on top to do it. But it's not foolproof, and that's where this software and this USB support comes in, because you can actually create a USB boot disk. So let's say, for example, not just a Windows boot disk, but a very specific boot disk to your own motherboard. You could go ahead straight away and use software such as the performance test of Passmark here. And again, don't worry if you're utilizing the free version, because even if you're out of the trial, you can still use Passmark's performance test mode to find out every single component inside your system. So for example, the minute you know what your motherboard, your main CPU and all of those parts are, you can head online and then start looking up those individual components and downloading those drivers. And once you've done that, head back into the EaseUS the Disk Copy Pro software, and then add the drivers one by one as you download them, and therefore you can create that boot disk as you see fit there. So as soon as you've got that ready and it scans for those bootable drivers and those INI driver files there, so again we can go in, and in that folder there's the drivers for this particular motherboard. I could go ahead and pop them all onto that USB, and that would allow us to create that boot disk for when we migrate over to the system. And if there are drivers missing, we've got that USB to get the job done there and read from it native. So let's go ahead and actually show you just how straightforward it's going to be to clone using this software. What we're going to do is go for disk mode. We could go for partition mode, and partition mode for those that just want to take advantage of smaller areas of a disk. So for example, if you partition storage on part of the disk and you partition the OS and the recovery drive, you can actually get quite surgical on which bits you want to copy over. But for me, I'm going to be cloning the whole disk and opening up the available storage. So let's begin the copy here of the drive inside onto our brand new drive within our single system here. We've got our primary selected drive. We go into disk mode there. From disk mode, all you need to do is go and click next. And it's important, by the way, to note that if you do want to clone the drives completely thematically identically in terms of the capacity, regardless of the second drive being larger, if you do want to maintain the layout and those partitions and not think about the unallocated space later, make sure to tick sector by sector. But if you're looking to extend the drive, such as I'm doing, to move a 1 TB OS drive onto a 2 TB drive, do not click the sector by sector copy there. Go ahead and now select the target drive, which is the ADATA Legend 970, and here you can see we've got the option to autofill the disk, and this allows us to either fill out the entire space accordingly, or again replicate the exact layout from the previous disk, or actually be quite manual on just how much we want to allocate. So for me, I'm going to autofill, and that's going to mean that the main storage area is going to be expanded into our newly allocated 2 TB area. But again, double check if what you're doing right now is best suited to your own storage network setup there, because you may be extending the layout of those partitions unnecessarily. I will also add that I'm not entirely certain if the target is an SSD makes any difference really these days, just because I think most users are going to be utilizing this for SSD copy. I think this is a fairly common procedure, but that's really it. We're now ready to copy this data over. So let's go ahead and click proceed. As you can see, the data on the target disk will be erased. So again, any of those original partitions, or when I mounted it as a volume just to double check the drive was healthy, are all going to go. But for now, click copy, and it's going to start the copying of that data over. Now, the amount of time this takes is going to be heavily dependent on your source disk more than your target disk. Most users, when they're migrating over, are very rarely going to be migrating the data on their original OS drive to a slower, smaller or inferior drive. Almost certainly most users are migrating away from a SATA hard drive onto a SATA SSD onto an M2 NVMe, or a Gen 2, Gen 3 or Gen 4 SSD onto a Gen 5, or any of those combinations. Ultimately, it means that the bottleneck more than ever is going to be the read speed on your OS drive. In this case, the SATA drive of 500 megabytes per second, or for that SSD, technically 6 gig if you want to be pedantic about it. But the write of that data over to my target SSD is going to be largely immaterial, because it's still going to be carrying the data over, and it's going to be about that read speed. Now, I'm going to be fast forwarding now to the completion of this task, but just before I do so, I do think it's worth touching on just a little bit there some of the reasons you might use software like this, and something I may cover in another video if I want to follow up on this after migrating this over for a new upgraded test machine here. Scrolling down, you can find out more about migrating that data. So obviously there's the obvious stuff with laptop upgrades and desktop upgrades, where you just simply do not have the physical facility to install a new drive, whether it is that you can't install an internal drive because you've only got one bay, or using an external docking station, again, be it for individual cloning on its own or just a USB dockable, is just not possible. Also, it's worth highlighting this can be utilized in a NAS capacity. So for example, if you're running a NAS drive with multiple disks and you're worried about restoration on a RAID level, you could clone every single disk in that RAID array onto new disks individually to maintain the RAID. Just bear in mind, if you're going to do that, do not expand that RAID to compensate for new storage area. That would almost certainly result in destabilizing the RAID and resulting in RAID degradation and data loss there. Okay, so we're booting this system here. Let's zoom back out there. Presumably now my motherboard has already picked up that the original SATA drive isn't present. Of course, we could, if we chose to, go into BIOS and manually select, but we're not going to be going for that there. We're just going to let the system go and boot in as normal. Hopefully it's hopping over to our other disk, and let's make our way in. Let's go ahead and go in with the reboot for us there. We're going in, so do you know what, let's not waste any more time. Let's get OBS up and running. Get that up and up there, so we can move straight back over to the screen. On for our fresh reboot. Checking the sound. And there you go, we're back in there. So we've gone with the reboot. It's now been 3 minutes there, and as you can see, the system immediately rebooted from that secondary drive. We can go in right now. There's going to be a lot of background applications booting up while I'm talking to you here during this initial reboot. But right now, as we open and wait for Crystal Disk, we can see that the original FireCuda drive is now absent, and there is our ADATA Legend disk, which is now our OS drive. On top of that, if we want to double check that that is still working absolutely fine and dandy, there is the 2 TB drive there. There is all of our data on that drive, and it really is that straightforward. So let's go in, let's restore those pages from earlier, and there you go. It's that straightforward to use disk copy to just clone your OS like that with no need of an external drive. So again, I know this video's been a bit salesy and pluggy, I get it. I just thought it would be recommended for you guys who in the last few weeks, months and even years when I've been talking about upgrading your SSD, just to show you a very good tool in order to get the job done there. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Again, we're going to be revisiting disk copy with regards to the NAS cloning that we talked about earlier on, for double checking and doing kind of an early restoration of a drive. But apart from that, I hope you've enjoyed this. There are links in the description to disk clone software here, and if you do want to take advantage of Disk Copy Pro, the link there should take you straight to it. If you've got any questions, or maybe you've done this, maybe I overlooked something for you there, or maybe you're trying to do a restoration in a Mac environment and hit any barriers, there's a few little curveballs on that one. I recommend you check that out. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Thanks again to EaseUS for sponsoring this video, and I will see you next time.